Next up, we have Lauren Weston. She'll continue the conversation about post-planting maintenance and how that can improve planting success. Lauren is district manager for Franklin County Natural Resources Conservation District. Like Sam, Lauren has had very many different hats in her career. She's served as an engineer on drinking water improvement, renewable energy, stream restoration, dam removal, stormwater system design projects. She's also worked to promote social justice in the food system. She's been a farmer, a writer, community organizer, and her talk today is called Learning from Revisiting Sites and Stewardship.
Hi, everyone. You are a very good-looking crowd, and there's a lot of you. So hi, I feel like I haven't presented in real life in a really long time, and I've just presented in like Zoom rooms where you can not realize how many people are looking back at you. So hi, I'm Lauren Weston. I manage the Franklin County NRCD. Luckily, a lot of friendly faces here, so that's great. First things first, I just want to say I didn't do any of the stewardship that I'm going to talk about. I was the funding program administrator for this work. Many of you know I haven't been out on a site in 2 years because I've mostly been on crutches. But it's nice to be here with you all today standing on 2 feet. And I'll also say that none of this work was also done by my team. We do all of our own stewardship, or a lot of stewardship on our own sites. But this was all work done by ICN table sitting there looking at me, the Red Start crew, and Northwood Stewardship Center. And then just Katie Kane, Ben Gabos, and Phil Wilson. I know you're here. Thank you. So I was behind the computer and just processing information. That's why I'm here today. I'm going to talk about this project that was funded by the Agency of Natural Resources, DEC, and the Lake Champlain Basin Program with lots of fun partners. And also lots of you have been to the sites I'm going to talk about today. So I'll probably try to move quickly. Oh great, it has a timer on it, so it can also tell me how slow I'm moving. I'm a text-heavy kind of slide maker, so I'm just gonna tell you that to begin with. Mostly because I feel like people always want the slides afterwards, and when there's just pictures, you don't know what I said, so I wrote it down for you. It'll be a journey together. These are all the things I'm going to touch on. None of the things I'm going to touch on are groundbreaking. They're things you probably already know, but maybe it'll be helpful to repeat, and it's also best practices from you all, kind of just all in one place. Project overview. So we had $400,000 for 3 years of stewardship. Woohoo! So far, we've hit 25 sites and 150 acres in the Lake Champlain Basin. The funding originated in the Lake Champlain Basin Program, so you can put 2 and 2 together there. The partners, so Ben, Phil, Katie, myself, Marley Roop, we all got together and talked about which sites should be prioritized to go back to use this funds for stewardship. Where the work was done were the sites that needed a little bit of extra love to move from struggling to successful. Most of those sites, thanks for the lead-in, Katie, had some pre-treatment for grass in advance. Most of the sites had some stewardship post-planting, so before we got back there, they'd already maybe been stewarded once or twice. They were not sites that had abundant woody invasives. They were sites that had landowner support, so at the very least, the landowners didn't mow them down already or hate us. And I will say, of the original project list that we'd come up with, some of the sites did end up being too far gone to feel like they were worth reinvesting in. So sometimes that happens. Again, nothing groundbreaking here, but doing more stewardship is better. I think you're going to hear that a lot today. Prioritizing success over perfection. You guys know these things. So for a lot of the work that we ended up funding, what we did was improving how many stems were still there by planting more and using adaptive species selection. So if some of those trees that we went back to were still there, we would plant more of them. We would plant less of the ones that weren't doing well based on the initial planting. String trimming, spot spraying with herbicide, and then knotweed treatment were also used. The common stewardship, no, that's a hard word if you try to say it that many times in a row. Common stewardship issues. Again, this is across 25 sites, so you're gonna run into different things on different sites. Everyone knows that. Here are the things that we ran into: animal browse, drought, competition, flooding, both based on like the weather, but also based on beavers who might be nearby. Some of that flooding introducing invasive species after the tree planting had already happened. So maybe you went there and there were no invasive species and then you planted, yay. But then you go back 2 years later and all of a sudden there's something unintentional there. Additional issues were the need for continued knotweed treatment, prior land use, and the scars that the land carries with it, and also just low survivorship due to transplant shock. Some of the solutions there are to manage the site as best you can, plant the trees in spaces where they're going to succeed, promote natural regeneration through free trees, and then replant when it's not going well. I feel like something I've been saying a lot lately is any of these projects, tree plantings, dam removals, if you heard my talk yesterday, none of these projects are one and done. You're going and you are married to that site for a while. Even if your funding doesn't agree with you, it's true. I know we're going to talk about this a lot today, so I figured I'd just have a slide about it. In this stewardship program, what was mostly used was this Aquamaster mix on most of the sites where there was herbicide approved and used. And then, honestly, I just stole some of the feedback from ICN and Red Start about how they were using the herbicide and literally like how they were doing it. And so on a lot of sites, again, we're going back to where the trees have already been planted. So most of the sites, they were just going back and spot spraying. I have the boom spraying note in here, but that was actually the pre-treatment. There was no boom spraying happening after trees were planted. So I want to be very clear about that. Something I didn't know until I was reading your guys' reports is that when you are herbicide spraying, it's good to tamp down all the grasses first so you make sure there's not drift going on, you're not hitting something you shouldn't be. So that was really useful information. And then the line about hard to spray in a straight line, this is, again, one of the pre-treatment notes that there seems to be a shift in moving from spraying a whole site with the boom sprayer towards more of spraying in strips and then planting in strips. But sometimes it's hard to spray in a straight line, and so some of the ideas that came out of this were that maybe it makes sense to put some grade stakes on either end and tie a string so you can spray in a straight line. Again, herbicide is great for some things. It's a good tool in toolbox, and there are some challenges with it, including if it's raining or windy, you probably shouldn't spray. And some side effects were that the treated areas, as mentioned earlier, might encourage more vines that could also cause damage. Spraying early in the spring is a good idea, and then coming back and spraying again early is good. I'm probably just going to skip this slide. I think Katie and Sam nailed it. How to plan for a successful initial planting. Again, these sites are not one and done, and I know that funding can also encourage, you find a spot, let's go plant it. That's often my MO too, but I think in a perfect world, it'd be great to identify a spot you want to plant and go there 4 times the year before and see what's going on in each of the different seasons. It's good to know what you're getting into and to really evaluate if it's a good site to plant. Again, time and money. But best practice would probably be to check it out a bit longer. One thing that we've run into before is just making sure you're aware of the power lines and the above ground and underground infrastructure. Check that early and often for obvious reasons. And then I think too, one of the benefits, if you are able to go in all 4 seasons before you plant, it's good to find out where there are areas that are just too wet to plant in the spring and be able to plan for that in advance so you're not making your life harder than it needs to be. Plant more densely, plant with species that are likely to succeed, and plant and mark your stems so you or someone else can go find them again. Site prep, again, there's too many words on here. Moral of the story is, do it always if you can. There's lots of different options. Maybe some funding policies will let you do it. I know it's been shouted out a couple of times, but the DEC draft public comment period is open through tomorrow. So if you do have thoughts on this, today or tomorrow would be a good time to send that in. Here's a site that was completely sprayed, the whole thing, not in strips. And then here's a fun one that I added in. This one was actually a project that the district did. This was a gorgeous, lush site, and the landowner decided to help us before we planted by burning it. I have one data point here. I wouldn't recommend this approach. Ben's shaking his head, so I got Ben Gabos on my side, which is always a good thing. I think it actually brought about more vines after the fact. It was awful to plant into. Everybody was coughing. I don't recommend it. The landowner was very kind and did not tell us he was going to do this for us. And then we showed up and had to plant. Nothing groundbreaking here. Plant stems that are 2 to 4 feet tall. Those seem to be doing really well. Plant willow stakes where it's wet. Again, not earth-shattering, but I think a lot of us think that you can just put a stick in the ground somewhere and it'll grow, but it needs to be in the right place. And it's helpful if you put the willow stakes downside down. So make that easy for yourself and your volunteers when they come in. Don't quote me on this. But here are some ideas of what to plant on sites in Vermont when you have these different conditions. This is anecdotal. This is not literature reviewed. Plant some trees, get them growing. Birds will come, they'll poop, they'll take care of the rest for you. So just get enough things that birds can land on. I think the ICN crew would back me up here. I know my staff would back me up here. It's really demoralizing to go to a site to steward it and you can't find the trees that were planted. You know $10,000 went into plant trees there and you can't find them. And if that's their 10th day of going to a site that you can't find the trees that were planted, like, it feels bad. It's almost worse than going to a site and finding dead trees than finding no trees. So I would strongly recommend that you mark your trees. There's a lot of different ways to mark them. This information is kindly provided by the Poultney Meadowy Natural Resources Conservation District. I saw several of their staff here today. Thank you for these notes. And so I think when you go to plant the first time, you're setting yourself up for success after. If you plant in a pattern, a predictable pattern. Also, if you then mark it, I think there's a couple of different ways you can mark your trees, either with flagging on your stems, but some of the issues there are that it could cause girdling if your trees are actually doing well. If you're using the biodegradable tape, sometimes that can lose color or disintegrate within a season. If you're using the plastic ones, it's plastic, so there's that. If you're using fiberglass stakes, those are great, but sometimes can get splinters and they're expensive and heavy. If you're using contractor stakes, those are really heavy. And then if you're using bamboo stakes, that seems to be kind of the pick of the bunch. People seem to like using those. if you use a bamboo stake and then you flag it at the top with the plastic. And it was kindly pointed out to me that there's usually a fat end of the bamboo stake and a skinnier end of the bamboo stake, and you actually want to put the fat end in the bottom if you're using the tape, so that the tape doesn't slide down off the bamboo. Thanks, guys. And they're not that expensive. And I really liked, there was a note also about, we typically use orange or something bright, but there's actually a note that for folks who might be colorblind, that white is actually a really good flagging color to make it obvious. So if you happen to know that your farmer or the person that they're contracting with to mow their fields can't see the colors, you're gonna lose your trees if they can't see it. Just a good illustration that it's easy to steward trees you can find. Truly, most of you came to our events over the summer, so I'm going to go through these slides relatively quickly and just highlight the sites that we went to. We are going to have at least one more event this summer too, so we'd love to see more folks out there. If you have a site that you really would like kind of this group to come see, let's chat too. We have some ideas, but if you have a good idea, let me know. This is the salmon site, great last name, in Montgomery. Many of you were here. There's a lot of information on the screen. I think kind of the images and the timeline are really helpful. And again, a lot of these images were shared at the event, so I'm just replicating it. But these slides will be available afterwards if you want to come back to them. This was a site with herbicide, and those were the species that were planted originally. Before and after the treatment of this field. These aren't sites I planted. Katie and Ben and Phil can always talk more about them. Yes, Katie?
Just to clarify, the treatment was the knotweed.
Treatment was knotweed, yes. Thank you. Collaboration is key. I might just flip through these photos and not narrate them because I think they're telling a better story than I can. And they're just so pretty. This is 2019. The left and right is tricky, huh? And this is at the event this past summer. So I think we're all pretty happy with the size of the buffer. I think the diversity of the buffer is still working some things out, but it's going well. And this is when we went to the second site. And some takeaways from this site, 7 years after the planted buffer was installed, it's now a fully forested buffer dominated by box elder with silver maples. The knotweed's still there, but it's mostly gone, so that's exciting. And we're excited to see where it goes next, but I think this is a really successful site that Katie and Ben and Phil would point to. I'm keeping an eye on the time. I am just going to pass through these next ones. I'm sorry. One of the other sites, again, talking about invasive species, those are a lot of the sites that we're trying to plant these days and trying to have a plan to have our plantings of intentional trees be successful is important. Tree tubes are a useful tool in the toolbox. Make sure you go back and take them off when they are done being useful. This is a great photo. Some of you might know that the Franklin County Conservation District has gotten pretty good at accessing QUISP funding, so the Clean Water Service Provider funding. So I know Christian was talking about the WFP enhancement funding. And I've gotten confirmation that a lot of the things I'm going to say at this point are just for QUISP funding, not enhancement. So the formula funds, not the enhancement funds. The formula funds come with additional stipulations around site access, licenses, typically, and then verification that the planting sites have been successful, and then operations and maintenance for those sites. There's a whole manual that goes with it, and as mentioned earlier, there are some public comment opportunities on some of the O&M clarifications right now. So for any trees planted with QUISP funding, formula funding, I'm going to use those interchangeably. I apologize in advance. A third party, typically after you plant, has to go back out the following year and run through a whole verification checklist for that planting. So again, it's really helpful if that, who knows who that person's going to be, can find the trees you planted. Probably a good idea. So highly recommend marking your stakes, or marking your stems, so that the person who's there can answer all of these questions. I would also just encourage everyone to look at the DEC O&M manual as it stands right now, if you haven't already, because what's in the manual is what an additional party, not the verifier, will go and actually do on that site. So there could be a lot of people touching these projects that are different from the landowner, different from the planter, different from the funder. So I would just encourage, again, mark your stems. Some more information from the manual. And then I literally just copied and pasted the O&M clarifications that are open for public comment right now into the next couple of slides if folks have time between now and tomorrow afternoon to submit comments if you see anything that doesn't make sense to you. Nothing groundbreaking here, but what now, plant sites where you can be successful. Don't waste trees that people are working really hard to collect seed for and grow, and you are putting in the ground that are not going to be successful. It can be really demoralizing. Use funding sources that work for your site. It sounds like there might be some opportunities for pre-treatment, which is great. Prep your sites, mark your stems, and steward those sites with all of the tools in the toolbox, and manage adaptively. I think Sam also used that nice phrase. Planting a tree is an act of hope. So I'm grateful to be in this room with you all. And then, as the old adage goes, when is the best time to plant an orchard? 20 years ago. But the second best time is now. And that's what I've got for you today. Thanks, everybody. I'll see what I can do here.
Thanks for that presentation. It was really informative for me. At that salmon site, is the box elder, was that a large component of the planting? Is that just what popped up really fast, or is that natural regen?
Votes? Ben, Phil, Katie?
Natural regen primarily. Particularly on the first site. So this ended up being an inadvertent sort of good experiment between our most favorite scenario is coming right out of corn, going into a forested buffer, especially in a site with silver maple, box elder, cottonwood, etc. around. There were, in the spring, tons of box elder seeds on the ground, and probably some saplings that were amongst the corn that last year. It does fairly well even against the corn herbicides. So we've seen, little saplings. So that site went right from corn. We did the wildflower mixed for fun to get some quick cover, but then it just turned into the mix of wildflower and saplings. I mean, we did plant it for insurance. In CREP, we kind of have to, but that site is basically dominated by natural regen with planted trees mixed in to that very dense forest. On the other side, the landowner and wanted to plant back to a cover crop. We thought it was only going to be winter rye, but it turned out to be a cool season grass mix and clover, which wasn't really ideal because it was kind of going the wrong direction. But so that's why that site was spot sprayed. The other site had no treatment other than the knotweed. Both ended up being fairly successful, but the one that was natural regen was, you know, many fold times more stems. So.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, Ben.
Hi, Lauren.
Hi.
I'm wondering, so you mentioned that you're doing a lot of these like first successional species when you're doing the initial plantings. Do you, is part of your project planning ever like planting some of those like second gen species? Or is that like is that included in the first step ever? Or do you ever go back and like incorporate those species after? Or is that something that you just kind of leave up to natural regen?
I'm going to answer, and then I think Katie might have an opinion here too. No, maybe not. We, at least at the district, what we've been doing is planting just kind of those early successional stems. And even when we go back to a site, it's usually if we're replanting there, it's because we've had such low survivorship of those early successional plants. So we are replanting those again. I do wonder if anybody else in the room, though, happens to have any thoughts on later successional stage plants, if they've had experience with that. We haven't. Jess might. If anybody wants.
Oh, sorry. I also have a question. Yeah, our experience is when you do multi-synusial planting, so that's trees, stems, herbaceous, and ground cover, natural succession just goes expedite way more than if you just do trees and shrubs. I know that might not always be possible with funding, but it helps. And I had a quick question. I don't know if that question's answered, but I was wondering if you could tell us about that plan about comments and where to find the link and what's that connected to. Thank you.
Yes. Any other thoughts on second generation species first?
The other thing is, we're probably less hung up on, I mean, we tend towards early successional because they're kind of adapted to that setting, but really it's deer that often are driving what we're going to plant along with the moisture regime of that site. So, and what will do okay, you know, in that soil type. Like, particularly we have different sets of trees for Champlain Valley clay than a lot of other sites, but really everywhere deer is common, is just, we're always thinking about it. So that limit, like that list that was up there, you know, our planting plans have shifted and become a lot less diverse over time because of deer. It's just how it is. We don't have funds. We're trying to start experiment a little bit with some fence, and Katie's done some small fence areas for deer, but practically if we've got, you know, a 30-acre site, we're not putting a deer fence around that whole thing. So it kind of is what it is. So we're just trying to figure out what is going to grow and less hung up on early successional and, you know, other species. So.
And then just to answer your question about the public comment, it is available on the DEC website. Also, if anyone from DEC is here and wants to point exactly to, yes, thanks, Rachel.
Hi folks, Rachel, Vermont DC Clean Water Initiative Program. We are, on batch 2 of the fund and policy public comment, and that closes end of day tomorrow. If actually folks want to come to me, if they want the link, I can send it to you directly if you want to give me your contact information. It can be kind of hard to find. That might be the quickest way, especially with the tight turnaround of tomorrow.